Hi there, and thanks again for joining us for another round of the SCSA's Toolbox Tuesday. My name is Laura, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about emergency response testing. So, at some point, we've all been through an emergency drill of some kind, whether it was the all too common fire drills. I grew up on the West Coast, so earthquake drills happen quite often out there, or even the all too common active shooter drills that are happening nowadays. Drills are important key parts of safety training. Having written steps in a manual somewhere is not going to ensure the best possible outcome following an emergency event. So it's important that we discuss this and we make a plan and we test it. So there are a few good reasons why emergency planning is so important to the success of any safety program. First, you need to train personnel, clarify their roles and responsibilities. Each person should know exactly what is expected of them in the event of an emergency. As well, you need to reinforce the knowledge, procedures, facilities, and systems and equipment. Sometimes the only time an employee may read or hear about an emergency plan is when they first get hired. The only way to ensure a smooth response to an emergency is to review, review, review. As well, you're going to evaluate policies, your plans, your procedures, as well as the knowledge and the skills of the team members that are participating. In observing the drill, you can see what works, what doesn't, and perhaps what people didn't know. You're also going to reveal any weaknesses or resource gaps following the drill. You can review the successes and the opportunities to improve. And it's going to help you comply with your local laws, codes, and regulations. Saskatchewan regulations do require an emergency plan be tested, as well as our core program requires a minimum annual emergency drill. And finally, you'll gain recognition for the emergency management and the business continuity program. This may only be internal, but knowing that your plan is effective and can be rolled out at a moment's notice can help alleviate stress and is simply just good business continuity planning. Emergency plans sort of require a trifecta to be effective. So written plans and policies, they're great. You absolutely need them to ensure that everyone's doing the same thing, explaining that process and the expectations. Exercises to ensure that it is actually effective in the real world you can have the best plan on paper, but if in the real world it's too convoluted, it's too complex, if people don't understand, or even in acting out the scenario, you realize it just doesn't work for your work site or for your building, it's important to exercise that to ensure that you know how it's going to work. And then, of course, training of all workplace parties so that everyone is on the same page and nobody panics. This training should be reviewed at least annually, so it's always fresh in everyone's mind. Now, when you're clarifying roles and responsibilities, everyone in a school or a workplace or any type of organization needs to know exactly what's expected of them in the event of an emergency, even if the only expectation for them is to remove themselves to safety as quickly as possible. Quite often, those responsibilities are broken down into roles within the company. So workers' expectations, what's expected of supervisors, superintendents, first aid trained persons, management as well needs to be involved. And you need to plan for visitors. If having visitors or students or any non-employees in your workplace, you need to plan to how you're going to respond with those people on site as well. So generally, companies clarify the roles within the organization depending on what the most effective strategy might be. So things like the people or persons that are actually in the building at any given time. So if your management team holds half of their work off-site, it may not be effective to assign first aid duties or contact the emergency assistants to them. But ensure that all roles know how to execute their roles and they're given an opportunity to practice. So they know where the tools and equipment are located and as well how to use them. You also need to establish good lines of communication. Who will be responsible for calling outside help? Who is responsible for communicating with those emergency teams? And which staff members must do head counts and report back? And to whom do they report? Now, as far as notifying employees in advance or during the drill, notifying of the drill in advance is not always necessary and can sometimes affect how that drill is performed. There are many factors when considering informing employees, including things like, is it the very first emergency drill you've ever held? Did you recently develop any new practices or procedures? Are there new employees? Do you have new equipment or building layouts that you may not be familiar with or other people may not be familiar with? You can always advise well in advance that a drill will be performed without informing them of the actual date or time or even the potential scenario. But the goal is to have people respond as though it is an actual emergency and not simply just go through the motions. It is important to note, though, that during the drill, it is okay and it is recommended to advise workers that it is, in fact, a drill. We want to avoid any panic. Now, when it comes to the scenario or the narrative of your emergency drill, you don't simply want to just pull a fire alarm and see what happens. You might have some very annoyed firefighters or EMTs on your hand. Decide in advance of the type of emergency scenario that you'll be preparing for. Think about all the likely scenarios at your work site. Maybe there's a likelihood of a fire on a plant floor, a release of a hazardous chemical. Maybe you have to practice man down for things like H2S. If you work outside or at heights, you might want to plan for severe weather events or rescue. If necessary, you can inform local authorities so they don't accidentally respond thinking it might be an actual emergency. But also, by informing them, they may be willing to participate and give you even more valuable information regarding the drill's effectiveness. Ensure you have detailed procedures to work from and create checklists of what you're looking for to see during the drill to ensure that it's effective. Practice all emergencies that have the potential to actually happen, especially if there's a strong likelihood of serious incidents or even fatalities. And remember, when disaster strikes, the time to prepare has passed. Whether you notify people in advance or not, everyone involved needs to understand the critical importance of treating the drill as a real emergency. Ultimately, the ERP drill should be designed to allow people to fail. In fact, that's the whole point. What you're doing is creating a safe environment for failure, helping you identify any underlying weaknesses and gaps in your plan. Risk assessment and corrective action tools can help you fill those gaps so that your team is truly prepared should you have to put your emergency response plan into action one day. And as always, our dedicated and passionate safety advisors and staff are here to help you at no cost at any stage of your safety program development. Please call or email our offices to set up a meeting or a phone call with one of them. Thank you and have a safe day.